Hello, everyone. My name is Vicki Hagberg. I'm the Regional Director of Northland Small Business Development Center and want to thank you for joining us at today's webinar on integrating generative AI in everyday workflows. We hope you find this valuable. It's the third part in a 5-part series. And so watch for those additional dates in May and June of 2025 or our recordings on our YouTube channel to get to those other key topics as well. Something we'd like to point out is this is the third part in a series. So if you are a brand new beginner to AI, that's great. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be kind of at an intermediate level today in our topic. And so you may want to go back to that generative AI 101 if you're really new to the topic and want to get some of those foundational ideas in place. Before we get started, I'll give you just a brief background on Northland SBDC in case you're not familiar. We provide no cost and confidential consulting in the 7 counties and all our parts of 5 Native nations in northeastern Minnesota. But if you're not located in our area, there is an SBDC serving you as well if you are located in the United States. And so we provide training and one-on-one guidance on helping businesses understand their finances, their cash flow projections, helping them through the business finance process, writing a business plan, all of these pieces on strategy and finance for small business. We also have experts in marketing, human resources, e-commerce, and all of our services are provided at no charge thanks to generous grant funding that we get at the federal, state, and local levels. And one thing I'd like to point out for those that are attending live with us today, when you exit the webinar, a screen is going to pop up in your browser with a really short survey to fill out. Let us know how we're doing, how you like today's webinar, and what kind of topics you'd like to see in future training opportunities. We really want to hear from you. So please fill out that survey at the end of the webinar today. And I'd like to thank Jenny Eaton for joining us behind the scenes here at the Northland SBDC program, and our special guest speaker and instructor today, Justin Castor. Justin, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Vicki. So just to level set on my background, as Vicki noted, it sounds like some folks are returning from the first webinar, which I was involved with as well. But short overview of my experience that's relevant to this webinar, and really 4 parts to that. So General Mills, over the past kind of two years, have been involved with generative AI capabilities as it intersects with innovation and new product development. Groove Capital, which is an angel investment group here in Minnesota, focused on high-tech growth startups, and certainly keep my eye open for businesses that are integrating or are AI native businesses. Future North is an initiative with my partner Vernon Rowland, where we work one-on-one with underserved entrepreneurs in the Twin Cities, and we do workshops with them. And one of the things we do is assess their Gen AI capabilities. And then lastly, Mithril Labs, which is a newer initiative where I do training for organizations and individuals, particularly at the intersection with generative AI and how to be innovative. So that's my background and context heading into this webinar. As Vicki mentioned, this is the third webinar in a 5-part series. And in the first webinar, we did kind of 101. And so that's where we're sort of picking up, assuming that folks on this webinar have some knowledge of the basics. And so if you didn't get a chance to participate in that webinar, number 1, or the marketing webinar by Diane, those are good follow-ups to this conversation, maybe to piece together some key information. So I'd like to just start off with, we want to make this interactive. And our interactive side of this will involve both chatting together, and then we'll do a few exercises together as well. So to start off with, just want to understand yourself and your organization, and just kind of thinking about integrating generative AI into your workflow. How would you kind of rate yourself? Maybe put in the chat, is it something where you don't really use Gen AI? Maybe you searched once on ChatGPT, but don't really use it in your everyday. Number two would be I'm doing some tasks, but it's not consistent, right? And it's not strategic. And three would be, hey, I've really kind of thought through some key workflows and I've started to experiment in a strategic way. And then whatever your answer is, would love you to supplement your comment with like, hey, what are a couple tools and workflows associated with those tools that you're using? It's always, I think, helpful to see what other people are doing that are your peers. So go ahead and put that in the chat, and we'll reference some of that going forward. So yeah, would love to understand uh, your context coming into this. Um, Today's agenda, we're going to walk through a few different sections here. And the first is to give you some perspective on why it's important to be thinking about integrating generative AI into your workflow. We'll give you a kind of some framing ideas as you jump into that process that have been helpful to me as I navigate the journey. We'll do an exercise that starts to identify some opportunities for workflow integration, and we'll do a few case studies framed in a different contexts. And then lastly, we'll go through some next steps, Q&A, and final thoughts. So let's kick it off with this question of why should you prioritize Gen AI workflow and integration? Now, you're on this webinar, so I assume you have some interest in it. But let me just kind of walk through a few ideas on why I think it's important. This is something we touched on in the 101 webinar, but just it's an important uh, 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 detail as it relates to what's happening in generative AI, in that, you know, it is a general purpose technology, much like the cell phone, the computer, the steam engine, which basically means it has broad applications across every industry, every part of your life, personally and professionally, which is why it's all over the news. And so that's an important thing to remember. The second thing is, uh, as it relates to work, everyday work for folks. This is an author that I feel like is a really good starting point to get familiar with what's happening. He wrote a book called Co-Intelligence, which I'll kind of highlight again later. He has a blog called One Useful Thing, and he's really an innovation thought leader as well, which is why I gravitated to him originally. But what he also is doing is he's really looking at the scientific, the data around what is the impact AI is having on people in the workplace. And so they did this study with a variety of different stakeholders, published by Harvard Business School. And they worked with, as I mentioned, used to spending time at General Mills, familiar with P&G, right? Another consumer packaged goods company. And that's where it took place. So they basically brought together four different groups. One group, two of the groups had AI enabled capabilities. They were teams of two or three. In one subset that were cross-functional, research people, commercial people, and then they had individuals that had AI alongside them. And then they had two other groups where they had that cross-functional two or three people working on product development, and then they had an individual that had no AI. So they had these four groups, and they were trying to understand what's the impact when you add AI to those other two teams. And I thought it was really fascinating. Overall, the AI-enabled teams, saved 12 to 16% of time spent, and what they produced was substantially more detailed and thorough and better as it related to new products at P&G. The other takeaways that I thought were interesting for this conversation are the AI enabled individuals, they outperformed the teams, those two or three people, cross functional teams, when you added AI to one person. Additionally, teams with AI performed were the best, but not statistically different than an individual with AI, right? And then the third and fourth takeaway that I thought was also worthwhile to mention today was, when we bring together cross-functional teams to work on a project, often the idea, people are bringing their own specialties and perspectives and kind of focused on that, especially in that product development cycle, which I'm familiar with. But actually, that kind of fades away. The team that brings in AI is able to supplement the knowledge and so that distinction between specialists and even experience, the lowest level experienced people on the product development process actually were able to level up with AI closer to the people that had a lot of experience in that process. And then lastly, just this is obviously a big question, right? How are people feeling when they work with AI? And they were more positive as they worked with it. So really interesting as it relates to workflow and bringing AI into your work as businesses and entrepreneurs. And when you sort of look at all the industries that have been impacted, there was a study done by Brookings where they took a look at all the industries. And what's unique about this general purpose technology and technology in general, generally technology would go after kind of lower end repetitive work. It's hitting the high end white collar industries the most. And but even, and so you see like overlap when we're thinking about workflows and tasks. You see a lot of overlap with some of those professions, lawyers, data scientists, coding, people that do coding. But actually, when you look at the more labor intensive businesses, you still see it there. I was at a conference giving a workshop for entrepreneurs, and there was a farmer that told me, "Hey, look, in my very manual lifestyle and process, I'm going to ChatGPT to understand how to grow apple trees. I've never done it before, so show me." And he started having conversation with ChatGPT in a way that he just wouldn't be able to do and get that information. So you're seeing every kind of job function not only be impacted but have potential to enhance what they're doing. You're also seeing organizations make stances that, hey, look, this is Shopify. They leaked a memo recently where the CEO was like, look, don't do any new hiring until you can show me that bringing an AI can't address that workflow or that job function. So some companies are taking it to the extreme, right? And really thinking about it, whether you agree with whether this is the right approach or not, it's happening. Um, this is a study that was done in 1973 where they kind of took a look at all the animals in the world, including humans, and it's like how efficient were they with their energy use, right? And the condor was by far the most efficient animal in the world. And uh, but what they did in this experiment is they sort of mapped it once you gave a human this tool, the bicycle, and humans significantly started to outperform the most energy efficient animal in the world, which is what sort of led Steve Jobs when he made this famous quote around what the computer is for people's minds. It really stems from that study, and he talked about the computer as the bicycle for the mind, right? And and so when I think about on my side, it's like the generative AI. It's not. It's even more so for our minds, our daily life. It's more than a bike. I think it's a rocket, and taking us to places that we've never been before. And you'll see a little bit later that I think there's risk associated with it, right? It's really powerful. So I just thought that was an interesting analogy to ground you in. So that's overall, that's kind of why I think some different ideas coming together, why it's important to be thinking about generative AI in your job, in your businesses. So assuming that you agree with the idea that you should be thinking about that in your workflow. Here's 3 ideas that we can leverage as we start the journey that are kind of like broader ideas. And the first one is, again, we referenced this in the 101 webinar. I think it's really important. I mentioned Ethan Mollick in this book, Co-Intelligence. If you're really interested in kind of getting a broader perspective, a good book to pick up, listen to on Audible, or read. It gives you some really interesting framing to start with. But he has 4 rules in that, which I think are sort of timeless and really helpful for me as I navigate generative AI. And one is this idea that always invite AI to the table. And that's really important as we think about workflows and how we can use it, right? It's a general purpose technology, as I mentioned before, and that means that we don't really know all the ways it can be used. And in your particular job, you have unique knowledge of that process and that task. So you got to kind of bring it in and try it and experiment, right? So invite it to the table. Um, Number 2, you have to be injecting yourself into the process. Sometimes people will start using these tools and just take an output from something like ChatGPT and distribute it into the world. That's dangerous because of things like hallucination, some of the areas that are weaknesses for these tools. But it's also, I think, maybe missing some opportunity, right? Where do you inject your creativity, your personality, and your sort of ethics and those types of things into processes and outputs. Number 3, this treat it like a person, and that's, again, I think it's really helpful as we think about workflows, right? If you're a marketer working on creating copy for some social media, like give it a role as a copy editor, right? And tell it it's posting on Instagram, right? So give it context. It's going to be more effective as you navigate working with these tools in your workflows. And then lastly, just assume it's the worst version of whatever tool you're going to use because things are progressing so fast. And this is important because you may, let's say in the next 2 weeks, try out a tool and find that it has certain capabilities. You have to revisit it in a later time to see has it improved. And I've certainly noticed that it has in many respects for some of the workflows I'm applying generative AI to. Number 2, this is as we think about our jobs, right? And I know there's concern in the broader media around AI replacing jobs altogether, and certainly that could be possible into the future. But I think when you have this perspective that jobs are bundles of workflows, right, with tasks, that's the way to kind of think about it and assess its value. So you're really evaluating use cases as it relates to different workflows and different tasks in your job. And then the third kind of broader concept I want you to kind of hold on to is we as workers, leaders in our jobs operate within systems, right? There's a broader system in our organization and in the ecosystem and marketplace. So we have to kind of think at a systems level as we go through this process, if we want people to adopt things well. We can't just ask individuals to do things on their own, okay? So I want to start off with this interactive side here with a little exercise, okay? So I want you to get a piece of paper if you prefer something tangible and you want to write down. Grab a blank piece of paper, a pen and pencil, or open a Word document, okay? And I'm going to give us a few minutes. We're going to get started thinking about tasks and workflows, right? That might be candidates for integrating generative AI. Okay, so let's start off with writing down on that piece of paper physically, maybe faster to type, so a Word document could be useful. And you don't have to write full sentences, just start to write down answers to these questions. So I'll just go through them, voice them over, and let's capture them. Okay, so the first question is, what are recurring frequent tasks or workflows that everyone in your organization, in your business takes a part in? So a few examples might be like meetings. We all do meetings. We all write emails. What are things like that are recurring and frequent. So go ahead and jot those down. And we're going to move, we'll give you a little time here. We're just kind of getting started on this, but just go ahead and jot down a few ideas for that first question.
Justin, I know where this is going, right? And so I'm gonna add two things on from my standpoint,
Yeah,
not necessarily specific answers to this question, but
right.
um, I think the big value I see in AI for small businesses is to free up some of the time that you as business owners, that you as employees are spending on frequent, repetitive tasks that you don't like to do, but you have to, right? And so we all have these kinds of tasks in our job. And the goal is to free you up to spend more time with your family, to spend time working with your community, and to work on your business instead of just in your business, right? To really be able to have the capacity to take a step back and look at the strategy of where your business is headed. And um, the other piece, and then I'll let you get to question two. I see AI as like a really good intern right now in early 2025. It can do great research. It is an excellent writer, with university level writing skills. It can process things, data in ways that it couldn't a year ago. And but you have to, like any intern, give it really good instructions and context on what you want it to do, or it'll probably not give you quite what you wanted.
Yep. Context and constraints. I think those
Hmm.
are those are really important two words to hold on to as you work with these tools. But think about it, it's kind of like how you would work with a real person, right? You wouldn't just say,
Exactly.
and so that's an important framing, for this as well. So as Vicky mentioned, and you'll see that although we didn't coordinate on all the ideas here, there's gonna be some alignment on our thoughts here. Number two and three, why don't you jump to those? What are tasks and workflows that all employees in your organization engage in, but they're less frequent? And I'll just be give an example on this one as performance reviews. So like when I've at General Mills, when I've gone through that process, they have a very particular output that they want things. And I certainly have all my ideas and all the things that I do there, but the secret is I've used Gen AI to summarize and make it probably the best performance review I've ever done as an employee. I use the tool for, and you can imagine different parts of that process. But there's other things we do, hiring a new employee, that take time and effort, our workflows, but they're not everyday things. So just anything else that comes to mind there that a lot of employees do. Maybe it's not everybody. And then number three is what are recurring and unique tasks and workflows that are specific to your job function. So if you're a marketing person, you're the one that's creating and launching social media posts, for example, right? So just start to write down a few bullets on each of these as well. So I'll give you a minute for that. And we're just getting started here. We don't expect you to come up with everything, but just want to give you a framing for how to navigate this process of identifying workflows and tasks that are good candidates for generative AI integration. So we'll give you another 30 seconds. This is where I should have used the generative AI apps to create background music, but didn't have time to do that. So, all right. So hopefully you got a list of these different kinds of tasks and workflow. So now let's prioritize, right? Let's look through that list. Okay. And let's start asking ourselves these three questions, right? What tasks or workflows do you really dislike or they're draining for you? Okay. And just mark a D next to those. Like if you could get rid of those or minimize the time you spend on those expense reports, whatever they are, right? Write down D next to those. Okay. And then what tasks and workflows bring you joy and fulfillment? Like you like those. Or another way to think about the J would be I think a human should own this. I don't think I should be giving this to AI. There's kind of two perspectives, but I think joy and fulfillment's an interesting sort of starting point for that. So go ahead and mark J for those. And there may be, you may have them all marked D and J, but there may be things that you don't love them, but you don't hate them, right? So just leave those blank. And then the last thing is what tasks and the workflows are the highest value. Okay, and I want you to think about value from a couple different angles, meaning it takes up your time and resources is one way to think about it. So as Vicky mentioned, hey, look, you could be using your time to do other important things in your business or being at home with your kids, right? So what are the things that take a lot of time and effort for you, or they're really impactful for your business, really impactful processes that, you know, are critical for results. And maybe circle these if you're writing or highlight them in your Word document in yellow or whatever color you're just gonna. All right, so we're just kind of going through, we're looking at these tasks. Now we've identified the different types of tasks and we're prioritizing. We're prioritizing them in a way that'll help us sort of group out the ones that, hey, these are good candidates to look at for generative AI integration. Okay. So hopefully you've made some progress on marking D for the ones that you dislike, J for the ones that bring you joy and fulfillment or that you think a human being should fully own or own a lot more, and then tasks that are high value from those different angles. Okay. So this is a little complicated, but this is how I think about the output in my mind to get around like, okay, so if you imagine this output as a 2x2, right? And you don't have to put it in a grid, but there's things that are high value that I do not enjoy that I want to get rid of in the top right. Okay. And so these are all really good candidates for Gen AI integration. And maybe even a fully automate if you could do it, right? Because you don't like doing them and they take a lot of time, right? And so if you look at a couple examples here, we're going to come back to these, but you can see for me, managing meetings, like the whole process of scheduling and taking notes and like I want to be engaged and facilitate it, but there's a lot of parts of that. And I put in yellow a task, that I've actually already outsourced, right? An example with Calendly. It just schedules the meeting, so I'm not going back and forth. You've probably have a tool like that, but we're taking the task under that broader workflow and outsourcing it to eliminate it. Okay. You can see on the left those are things that are high value, right? They matter to business results. They take time where you want to own it or you have joy. And for me, I love to talk to the people I'm serving myself. I want to have that empathy. I would advise any entrepreneur or business to do that on a regular basis. Happy to talk to you more about that process because I think it's so important. And AI can help, but I want to own that. I want to be very involved, right? And you can see other examples here, like the training stuff that I'm doing. I want to own that. It's my own voice. It's how I think about this topic. So this is how you can start to separate out where to spend time. So I spend time on the top left, and I've actually started to integrate generative AI across the workflow of customer interviews to synthesize, to do other things with it, but I still am very heavily involved. So it's selective on how I get it engage with it in those contexts. So hopefully this makes sense. And then the bottom, honestly, like don't spend time on it. This is just my view. You can spend time on it, but if it's not taking a lot of time, it's not a lot of value, then why? Why spend the time to figure it out? Okay. So I just wanted to give you a starting point, and this will be, we'll provide the slides afterwards for, if you think about just any organization tasks that you can automate that are time consuming and kind of fall into that bucket where it's like you may love doing these things, but they probably, if you can outsource them, a lot of people would vote, hey, how do we automate this as much as possible? So you can see things like managing my inbox, calendar scheduling, which I mentioned, just reformatting content that I've created, creating job descriptions. Yes, you want to make sure that the right responsibilities in there, but imagine if you could have a great starting point. Would you want to leverage a tool that could help you get a really great draft that's almost ready to go. You can do things like this today, actually, with generative AI. Okay. And we'll come back to meeting summaries in a little bit. So these are examples, 10 examples of things that, like I think at this point in the phase of maturation of AI, like in the way like tools that I think you might want to keep to be distinctly you or distinctly human, like writing. Yes, ChatGPT can write great, and yes, it can even pick up your tone, but it's a creative process, right? And you actually learn a ton when you write about a topic, for example, if you're depending on what type of writing it is, so that you may want to own that. And so there's examples here of things. Market research, I kind of mentioned, and we'll give an example here in a little bit, is another area where it can augment and add value to, but you want to be more heavily involved. Okay. And again, this will be takeaways for you as starting points. So you've got the list that you wrote down, you got these ideas, these are assembling thought starters for you on where to assess generative AI in your workflows and tasks. Okay, so let's just in the chat. You did your list, right? You saw these lists here, right? Maybe something caught your eye on those lists. Like, what are one or two tasks or workflows? A workflow would be like the broader process where there's tasks under it that you think are good areas to experiment with Gen AI from your perspective. Like, what did you mark down as D and high value? Right? Go ahead and put those in the chat. Um, and then if, in the same question, like, did you identify a workflow or a task that you want to own it? Like you think you should be involved. You want to um, uh, maybe selectively integrate generative AI, but you think, hey, this is something that I want to kind of hold for myself. So go ahead and put those in the chat. And again, we're going to learn from each other. So um, Vicky, maybe you can help me see if we're giving enough time for people, but go ahead and put those in and see what other people are thinking as it relates to these
Yeah,
questions.
we heard from one person already, social media posts, and I think there's a couple of frameworks where that becomes really relevant. And one is around building your social media content calendar.
Hmm.
But another one might be, as you're agonizing over what exact words to use, right, for your post, it's a great
Yeah.
way to do that.
Yep.
Um, we have a couple other ones in here: meeting notes, summaries, and social media posts, email formatting, data extraction, scheduling. Definitely really common things that we're seeing with folks.
Hmm.
And budgeting. So one of our attendees here says, use AI for notes, planning, and scheduling, but I want to keep budgeting as her task, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah, yeah.
something she enjoys, something that, maybe wants to have a little bit more control over, and really
Hmm.
make sure there's no errors or surprises. And that process,
Yep.
personally, of going through that budgeting process can
Yep.
help you really understand your organization.
That's right. That's right. Financials are part of your story, right? And so you need to own that many times. So great. Well, hopefully you're learning a little bit from each other. A few other ideas for you to take away as you think about maybe building out additional things and prioritizing where you want to start, right? Where you want to spend time looking at integrating AI above and beyond what you already do. So one idea is just set aside time on your regular weekly calendar. I call this, like, for experiments, my AI sandbox. Like, where is the spot on your calendar? What hours and times in the week are you actually looking at and trying tools on important workflows? And actually coming out of this, like, you got to make time for assessing those tasks and workflows like we just did. Building more time in to think about where it can integrate. So if it's not on your calendar, it's actually not important. So, that's something that you can do. The other thing is, like, just over the next week, let's say you want to jump in starting next week, like whether it's a physical journal or just a document that you can write in OneNote or whatever, like document how you're spending your time. Get to the end of the week, you've documented some things, look at your calendar and say, how did I spend my time? And go through and update your list. Where did you really feel drained where you were spending time? Where did you feel fulfilled? And those are good opportunities for thinking about generative AI integration as well, right? So you have two ideas like put time on calendar and document for a period of time, like what's actually happening in my workplace. And honestly, you can do that for your personal life too, because there's opportunities in your personal life for integrating generative AI. Meal planning is a great one. So recapping key points here for this mapping process: high value, low joy, as Vicky said, are great prospects for heavy AI integration. High value, high joy, or where human ownership should be there, you can augment, right? There's spots that you can bring it in. It's high value, so you should probably think about that. Number three, to maximize business impact, I mentioned this as one of the overarching principles. Like think about this at a systems level. So as an organizational leader, how are you permitting people, right, to make time to assess their workflows? How are you rewarding them, right? Those are things to think about. And then put things on your calendar, right? You got to do that. And as an organization, related to number three, could you at an organizational level give people time for that and make time for training and experimentation? So key points to think about as you think about your mapping workflows and finding good candidates. So I heard in the chat, Vicky, you know, some things that kind of resonate that you'll see coming up here, which is as we explore that bucket in the top right, integrating Gen AI into a high value, low joy workflow. I'm going to give an example, right? So this is my how calendars often felt or feel in the corporate world. I know entrepreneurs are just as busy, but in the corporate world you have less control, it feels like sometimes. And so it looks like this, and it's like people are they're not smiling. This is picture has people smiling. Like people spend so much time in meetings. I love this quote, which is, a meeting is an event where minutes are taken and hours are wasted. It's so true, right? And so how can you make a meeting more effective? And I actually like this example as well, because as you're thinking about your organization, what sort of gateway use cases to get people? It's like low barrier, but they can see value right away. And meetings and thinking about that meeting process is really great. So here's my mock-up of a meeting workflow, right? So you can see the steps in green, so broader steps in this workflow: scheduling the meeting, sending the pre-read materials and agenda, conducting the live meeting, and sending a meeting recap with action items. Like these are kind of common broad steps, and you can see tasks under each of these steps that are involved in executing those, right? And so I was like, okay, well, I know meetings don't always feel great. So I went to a website. It's an AI website that's called Elicit. It's basically um, a search database. It's an intelligent database of all the academic research out there on different topics. And I typed in and I said, hey, tell me about meetings. What research has been done in meetings, and like, what are the best practices, right? And so the 10 reviewed papers came back, and it produced 5 recommendations on the bottom right, or areas. And obviously post-meeting summaries are critical. When you have a super busy schedule, like, yeah, you want to send the recap, but sending a great recap doesn't always happen, right? And so, that's sort of like, what's the challenge? The challenge is, how can Gen AI help with this step in the process, right? How could Gen AI help with this area that's a best practice that I've often seen people not do in this 4-step process? Really great meeting summaries in a timely fashion, right? So I use, and I've been using this for a while for different purposes, an app called Otter.ai. Okay. So it works for meetings that are in person or online. It can generate transcripts, recordings, summaries, action items from meetings, and it's cross-platform. You can see I'm doubling down on this idea that it's cross-platform. Not intentional there, but it's works for in-person meetings, virtual meetings, and even meetings you can't attend, right? And it could also work for dictation. So it's an app that is out there. You can leverage for this part of the process of post-meeting summaries, but other capabilities as well. So let's just kind of I just want to demonstrate when you're thinking about a tool like this in that workflow, how it can be valuable. Okay, so I'm gonna go to um, Otter, and it's just gonna take me to what I see in this platform. Okay, so I'm sure some people, if you use a meeting AI note taker, go ahead and put it in the chat. Which ones do you use and what do you like about it? So you can see this is a recording from a meeting that I had with my wife and a real estate agent about renting our home. And it's got a summary generated right after the conversation of everything that was talked about. And I'll mention why we're going to rent our home in a little bit here. It's got a detailed transcript with all the speakers. It actually can produce
To
audio of
make
the
it feel productive.
conversation
It's a
if
lot
I
easier
want. So
than
I can go back and listen to things live. Um, and I can go through and search this. And I can also go through, and one of the things that I think is really interesting about these tools is I can ask them, let's say I have multiple meetings. One of the use cases that's really powerful is customer research and interviews, which I use it for. And I can ask Otter everything I learned on that topic. So, I think I did an example here. Yes. So I asked it, what was everything we learned about renting our home in Indonesia? And it went through as when we live in Indonesia. So it gave the summary from all the conversations we've had from that process. So these are powerful tools that can help with that step in the process. Okay. Um, you can also do things like, hey, I want to create a prompt in ChatGPT that has a same prompt I use every time for every meeting. And you could do this at an organizational level. And we're going to give people that prompt, and they're going to be able to take from whatever note taker we use, whether it's Zoom or a lot of these platforms have these notes being taken, the transcripts being created. You can create the prompt and generate the summary in the same way and have it sent right after a meeting. Now, I'll just note that you still want to have people involved in this process. As I mentioned, human in the loop is a really important concept, but you can do that addressing this process, make it very sort of standardized, high quality by bringing in these tools like these AI note takers and leveraging standardized prompts for that process. I use it even when I'm trying to come up with ideas for different topics I'm working on, and I keep the notes and I have it all in one place. This is an overview of there's different note takers out there. You can see Zoom's in there as well for your online meetings. This is a tool that exists for this high value, meaning it takes a lot of time to do good summaries, to run good meetings, but producing, quality, addressing that issue is definitely possible today with these tools. So one idea for you as it relates to that bucket, if meetings is frustrating for you, is just how might your, at a systems level, how might your organization integrate Gen AI into the meeting process, right? This is the way to kind of think about it. You identify use cases, maybe someone individually starts to experiment, and then if it has broader application across a lot of people, you can think about integrating it at a systems level. So um, that's one case study of taking an existing high value, sort of low joy task or workflow and bringing in AI to improve it. Okay, so you're integrated into the process. I'm going to show you now how you can sort of have generative AI sort of drive a process. You're creating a new generative AI process overall. So as I mentioned, so the reason we're looking into renting our home is we're going to live abroad in Indonesia starting at the end of June for a year. So this is the case study we're going to use today. So I have another question in addition to renting. It's like, how do you do healthcare, right? In living abroad. It's like a big mystery to my wife and I, right? So it's one of the many questions we have. And so for this process, I'm going to kind of show you how we piece together information that can get us up to speed on how to think about that important question. So we're going to go through 3 steps. One, I'm going to try to create a research report that's extensive and I'm going to leverage ChatGPT to also generate the question I should ask to get that report. Okay. And then I'm going to generate the report and load it up into another tool that helps me understand it. It makes it convenient to understand. So let's kind of walk through these steps. And again, this is a fully kind of generative AI, working with generative AI to improve our process. And so what I'd like to do is actually introduce you to one of the tools. So my assumption is many of you probably have fooled around with ChatGPT at this point. I'd like us to open up a different tool and try an activity together. So this tool is called Notebook LM. And if you have a Gmail account, it's going to be a little bit more seamless. If you don't, you can do it after the call, but you could try and sign up for Gmail. It's a pretty quick process. But let's go ahead and open up Notebook LM .google um, and open that up in your screen. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of navigate to a few steps that we start to leverage that tool and another key tool in ChatGPT that I think is super powerful as well that can kind of feed into this workflow to make our inputs really really smart as we try to answer that question. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go to ChatGPT and I'm just going to show you something here that I did as a workflow. So I created this workflow um, in generating the inputs for Notebook LM from ChatGPT. Okay, so the first thing I did is ChatGPT has a function called deep research. And let me just let me see if I can just go to that here and show you. So deep research, and can you see that at the front of the screen? Okay, Vicky, just give me a thumbs up. So this is a tool that allows you to have at your fingertips, sort of like in a management consultant level capability for a question that you have, a research topic. So, okay, so what I did is I went and I said, hey, so what I want to do is I want to find, first I'm going to ask ChatGPT, what is a good prompt? What's a good question to ask ChatGPT using that deep research function that'll get me a great answer on this question of healthcare. Okay, so I typed in the top here and I gave them context on, hey, we're Americans, I got kids, this is what we're doing. And it gave me a prompt here that I used or that it generated. Okay, so it gives me a prompt that I can then type into ChatGPT and generate a report. So it took probably 5 minutes after I hit generate with that deep research function, this report. It's 32 pages long. It's got a variety of different information in there across all my sub questions. And it's really extensive and it has all the references. So this is just my question on healthcare, but you could imagine this for your business as well. On a research question for a new product area, a variety of different things like that you're trying to work on. This is something I generated in 5 to 10 minutes. It's extensive. It has all the references, and I get it with the plus version of ChatGPT, which is $20 a month. So I just want.
Perplexity has similar deep research.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like Claude is moving into this space. I found out earlier today
Yes.
when I was using it. I'm like, whoa, why is it behaving like
Yes.
Perplexity?
Yes.
Um, and another area that I've used this a lot with small businesses is helping them to understand licensing requirements.
Sure.
Where
Absolutely.
especially if you're in like the food-based business or something like that,
Yep.
um, it it's helpful to be able to click those links and get to those state or local license related websites and make sure you're really getting that data from a good source and it's
Yep.
not hallucinating, right?
Right. Exactly. So the next thing I did was I took that report and I uploaded it into Notebook LM. So if you go to Notebook LM, you should see a screen that looks like this where you can create a new project. So why don't you go ahead and do that here? And you can play around with this after the call as well. But I came in here and I just added that deep research report. I went to my Google Docs, it's 32 pages long, and I just uploaded that report. Okay. So, and then it becomes, and I can go and I can discover other resources in this tool by just saying, hey, I want, outside of this report, is there other things that will help me understand this topic? And so I can kind of hit discover, which is kind of like searching through Gemini, which is the background for this, which is Google's version of ChatGPT essentially. And I just type this in and it will generate a variety of sources here that I can bring in. So what I'm going to do is just give you the same thing to try on your end, which is this here to type into that discover function, okay? And try just putting that into the Notebook LM. So coming back to Notebook LM, you've probably created at this point, right? Let's come back here, a new project, okay? And what you're doing is you're just coming here and you're discovering, uh, uh, bear with me a second. You're going to be hitting the discover button here on the top left, and you're just going to type in that and you're going to submit it. Okay.
And can
And what
you paste that prompt into the chat for
I
folks too?
did, I
Oh,
thought I did.
I think it might have gone
Oh,
just to
not
hosts
not
and
for everybody.
panelists.
Not for
Yep,
sorry. Here we go.
that's okay. The default is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
to us. So
Yeah.
thanks.
So there's that prompt, okay? And so what you can do is enter that into the Discover, okay? And it's going to start bringing up sources for you, okay? And so you can, let's just say you import all these sources. It's got YouTube videos and different things. And again, you can decide which ones you want to use. But from this, you can generate different pieces of information or outputs that can help you understand this question. Okay. And what I'm going to show you, so you're kind of going through that process, experimenting with the things that you just brought in there. What I did was I've already done this, and I brought in that extensive report, 32 pages, and a few other YouTube videos. And what I was able to do here is a couple things with this information, right? I can now break down, you can see a mind map of all the key topics where I'm able to break it down into pieces and dig into this question with more specificity. Okay. So this tool has really interesting capabilities to organize and synthesize the data. I can create study guides, briefing documents. The other thing I can do is I can generate a podcast. So this is an example here of me loading two AIs talking together about all this information in a condensed way that I could take on a run, that I could share with someone more
Welcome to the
broadly.
deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that's definitely top of mind for anyone living, working, or just constantly moving around internationally.
Yeah, we're talking about navigating international health insurance and, actually getting health care when you're abroad.
Exactly. And, it's funny, we were watching this YouTube video, and the creators told this story about a hiking trip in the Amazon, of all places.
Oh, yeah.
And, well, things took an unexpected turn. A medical issue popped up. Thankfully, it all worked out okay in the end.
Oh.
But it really, hammered home.
So it's a 15-minute podcast that helps me digest this information. The mind map can help me digest this information. And I fed it with really great information from another AI source, the deep research report. And so what I'm trying to convey here in this is I've kind of reinvented the process of looking into this important question for our family. Like, how would I have done it prior to using these AI tools? I guarantee you I wouldn't have a 32-page highly referenced report from deep research in ChatGPT that's consolidating a bunch of resources. And then I wouldn't have had Notebook LM, another really powerful tool to synthesize and understand this important question, right? So what I've strung together with these powerful tools is a new workflow using generative AI in working together across these different capabilities. And even asking ChatGPT, like, what's the right question to ask the deep research report, which honestly is usually how I start when I'm going to start trying to get information. Is I draft something and I say, can you improve this? This is what I'm trying to accomplish. So it's a really interesting way to think about how we work and go through these important workflows and processes. Is you can almost reinvent a process altogether. And I'll just say that even in that process, coming back to these principles, being the human in the loop, I'm still injecting myself in on choosing which data to bring into the notebook LM, making sure the prompt that was created is actually what I want to ask. I'm injecting myself in this process to make sure the information that I want comes out of it in a way that's most useful. So I think my question here is, have folks on the phone started to think about workflows in this way? Have you started to create your own new workflows, piecing together tools that are generative AI tools in a process? So if you have, go ahead and just kind of type that into the chat. And it may be like functional specific workflows. If you're a marketer, right? You've probably really started to think about generative AI across a key workflow and how it can generate social media posts, do these different steps for you, post it for you, schedule it. Go ahead and put that in the chat so others can get those ideas as well.
As we wait for folks to type in how they might be using, multi-tool workflows, one one approach I've used in the past, kind of to get over limitations of some AI tools related to token limits and things like that, is to feed in, 5 different reference sources. Because a lot of what I do is to take data from multiple different sources, pull it together
Yep,
into one consolidated, document or summary, and then, but with enough detail to analyze it, right?
yep, yep,
And sometimes using ChatGPT to say, okay, summarize the takeaways and key points from these 4 research papers, and then bringing that into Claude, where I'm saying, hey, create this analysis table based on this data, and just finding the best tools through trial and error, honestly,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
for each source.
That's a really great point, Vicky. Is and part of the reason I wanted to bring in Notebook LM is because a lot of people haven't used it. And just to
Yes.
make the point that there's these tools that specialize in different things and have strengths in different things, and piecing them together can be super powerful. So
Mhm.
I'll just kind of go through a few, thoughts here as we kind of wind down the webinar, which is some next steps, right? Some next steps at an organizational level. As I mentioned, we got to think systems here. So protecting time for your employees to experiment actually is super powerful. Give them that time, on the calendar to look into their workflows, to experiment with generative AI. That's something you can do at an organizational level in your business. As you identify use cases, right, and workflows, like create prompts, create tools that people can just copy and use. And you might have working groups kind of tackling different areas. Working group sounds a little corporate, but you could create some use cases that are, high value and low joy for a lot of people. Or if there's key processes that are competitive advantages, documenting where AI comes into that workflow might be really helpful in your organization. The last 2 thoughts here are, again, coming back to that systems level, think about your tech stack strategy. But 2 and 3 are really important based on when I've been working with organizations around transformation and innovation, like performance incentives and goals at an organizational level. If they aren't reflecting AI as a priority, it's probably going to become pushed to the side. So thinking about those 2 dimensions are really powerful at a systems level. And then training, right? Invest in some training. There's a lot of um, training that's not crazy expensive right now. and then bring in the people that are sort of champions in these different areas in your organization and kind of highlight them. Let them teach others in your organization as well as people go through training. For you as an individual, you protecting that time, right? Your organization may do it, but giving yourself that time is really important. Journaling, as I mentioned earlier, to identify some workflows and tasks is really helpful. And it's really just like take the time to kind of think through where you're spending your time, where you have low joy, where you're enjoying and want to own something. Those are things that you can do. And you can do this in the short term. Give a first run at, we've started documenting our tasks and areas. Like, go ahead and build on that a little bit. We're giving you some ideas in the slides as well, as I mentioned, for other places to think about workflows and tasks. And then this last one is something I'm taking from the design thinking world that I've been involved with in the past, which is sort of like using intention around designing your day. And Vicky, you said something earlier which says like these tools should enable a better version of your work life and your personal life. You shouldn't be working more. Like you shouldn't be busier, right? And so like I think it actually makes sense to like put pen to paper. Like we did this exercise for someone that was looking for a career where they mapped out how they want to spend their time in a day and a week. And you could do the same exercise here. Like if you could spend time on these tasks and in this way in a given day and a given week, what would that be? And what would fall off? It's another way to think about are these generative AI's tools enabling for you as an individual worker and a person. So, and then, lastly, just as I mentioned, it's a general purpose technology. There's no manual here, right? You have to experiment. You have to push and give that time to understand the different tools that can do what you're looking for, as Vicky mentioned, but also like where it's going to have the most impact on your kind of workflow. So I thought we stop there. I know we're a little bit over, Vicky and Jenny, so you can say whether we have time for Q&A a couple of minutes or not, but yeah.
Sure, we'll hold it open. We don't have any questions in the chat currently, but if folks have something, just type something in and we'll, as we wrap up here, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording for today. Justin, I
Yep.
want to thank you again for taking time to share this knowledge and this framework of really thinking about why we are talking about generative AI for small business and how to approach, where do you start? And I think
Mhm.
today's webinar really provided a lot of value of how do we take a minute, write down those tasks, identify which ones are a fit for AI and prioritize them and start with one and see how it
Mhm.
goes
Yep.
and then start to build. Don't start with the most complex workflow.
Right.
Start with something fairly straightforward and build those skills over time. So thanks again. And I want to remind folks, we have 2 more webinars in the series coming up in May and June 2025. We have an in-person conference coming up as well. It's going to be offered in 2 locations on 2 dates, in Moorhead, in Western Minnesota on June 10th, and in Carlton in Northeast Minnesota on June 17th. So we're really looking forward to putting that on in partnership with the Minnesota SBDC network. And so thank you everyone for joining us today.